This video offers calm, thoughtful advice to ease anxiety, with soft music and scenic views in the background. Feel free to jump to the final section if you'd rather just relax. What if I told you that your anxiety isn't a mental illness, but the price you pay for being truly free? That every panic attack, every sleepless night, every moment of existential dread is actually proof that you're living as a conscious human being should. Jean-Paul Sartre, one of history's most influential philosophers, discovered something terrifying about human nature. He realized that we are condemned to be free, a phrase that sounds liberating but actually reveals the darkest truth about consciousness. Unlike animals who follow instinct or objects that simply exist, humans are cursed with the burden of choice. Every single decision you make, from what to eat for breakfast to whether to quit your job, carries the weight of infinite possibilities. And here's the kicker: you can never escape this responsibility. Even choosing not to choose is still a choice. This is why your mind races at 3 a.m., why you feel overwhelmed by simple decisions, and why freedom itself has become your greatest source of suffering. Picture this. You're standing in a grocery store, staring at dozens of cereal brands, and suddenly you feel that familiar knot in your stomach. It's not about the cereal, it's about the crushing realization that you must choose. And whatever you choose defines who you are in that moment. This seemingly trivial decision becomes a mirror reflecting your deepest fears about identity and responsibility. Sarah, a 28-year-old marketing executive, describes her daily experience. I wake up and immediately feel this weight on my chest, not because something bad happened, but because I know I have to make 1,000 decisions today, and each one feels like it could change everything. This isn't weakness. This is the human condition in its rawest form. We are the only creatures on Earth who must constantly create ourselves through our choices, and that creative process is absolutely terrifying. Sartre's philosophy reveals a shocking truth. We don't have anxiety despite our freedom. We have anxiety because of our freedom. Traditional psychology tries to cure anxiety as if it's a malfunction, but existentialism shows us it's actually a natural response to the overwhelming nature of human existence. When you feel anxious about your career, relationships, or future, you're not broken. You're experiencing the weight of infinite possibilities. The paradox deepens when we realize that this freedom isn't optional. You can't return your consciousness like a defective product. Even if you try to escape through routine, addiction, or blind conformity, you're still choosing to escape. The anxiety persists because deep down, you know you're responsible for every aspect of your existence, including your attempts to avoid that responsibility. What makes this particularly brutal is that our choices don't just affect us, they define us. When you choose to be kind, you're not just performing an action, you're declaring that kindness is valuable and that humans should be kind. Every choice becomes a statement about what humanity should be. No wonder your brain feels like it's constantly under pressure. It literally is. This is why people often feel most anxious during periods of transition or opportunity. A job offer, a relationship decision, or even choosing what to study isn't just about personal preference. It's about taking responsibility for creating yourself and, by extension, contributing to the creation of human values. The stakes feel impossibly high because, according to Sartre, they actually are. Sartre wasn't just theorizing from an armchair. He lived through World War II, witnessing firsthand how ordinary people made extraordinary choices under extreme circumstances. His philosophy emerged from observing how humans respond when stripped of external authorities and forced to decide for themselves what's right. He saw that even in the darkest moments, people still had to choose, and that choice revealed both the terror and the dignity of human existence. Modern neuroscience actually supports Sartre's insights in unexpected ways. Dr. Antonio Damasio's research on decision-making reveals that our brains are constantly running predictive models about potential futures, creating what he calls somatic markers, physical sensations that guide our choices. What feels like anxiety might actually be your brain's attempt to process the enormous computational load of evaluating infinite possibilities. Psychologist Rollo May, a pioneer in existential psychology, built on Sartre's work to show that anxiety isn't pathological, it's ontological. It's not about what might happen to you, it's about who you might become. May observed that his most anxious patients weren't those facing external threats, but those confronting the reality of their own freedom to change their lives. The anxiety emerged not from danger, but from possibility. Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor and psychiatrist, took this further by demonstrating that even in the most constrained circumstances, humans retain the freedom to choose their attitude. His work in concentration camps proved Sartre's point. We are indeed condemned to be free, and this freedom persists even when everything else is stripped away. The anxiety that accompanies this realization isn't a bug in the human system, it's a feature that signals our fundamental capacity for self-creation. But here's where it gets really twisted. What if your anxiety is actually protecting you from something far worse than discomfort? Sartre identified a psychological defense mechanism he called bad faith, the desperate attempt to convince yourself that you don't actually have choices. People who never feel anxious about decisions might not be mentally healthier. They might be living in complete denial of their own freedom. Consider this disturbing possibility. Every time you feel overwhelmed by options, your brain is actually functioning exactly as it should. The people who seem effortlessly confident in their choices might be unconsciously limiting their perception of possibilities. They've essentially performed psychological surgery on themselves, cutting away their awareness of alternatives to avoid the anxiety of choice. But what else are they cutting away in the process? There's a hidden experiment happening in your mind right now. As you're processing this information, you're simultaneously choosing how to interpret it, what to believe, and how to let it affect your future decisions. You can't step outside this process to observe it objectively because you are the process. This creates what philosophers call an infinite regress. You're choosing how to choose, and there's no bottom to this rabbit hole. The most unsettling part? Sartre suggests that even your personality, your values, and your sense of identity are choices you're making, moment by moment. That feeling of being stuck in patterns or believing this is just who I am might be the biggest illusion of all. What if everything you think is fixed about yourself is actually just a choice you keep making unconsciously? And what if recognizing this truth is the key to either ultimate freedom or complete psychological breakdown? The psychological impact of truly understanding Sartre's paradox can be devastating or liberating, depending on how you choose to process it. Many people report experiencing what existential psychologists call ontological shock, a sudden overwhelming awareness of their own freedom that can trigger panic attacks, depression, or a complete restructuring of their worldview. It's like waking up from a dream and realizing you've been sleepwalking through your entire life. This realization creates what researchers term existential anxiety, fundamentally different from clinical anxiety disorders. While traditional anxiety focuses on specific threats or situations, existential anxiety emerges from confronting the groundlessness of existence itself. There's no medication for the terror of realizing that you are completely responsible for creating meaning in a universe that offers no inherent guidance or predetermined purpose. The psychological defense mechanisms people develop to cope with this reality are fascinating and tragic. Some retreat into rigid belief systems, desperately seeking external authorities to make choices for them. Others become paralyzed by analysis, endlessly researching and planning to avoid the moment of actual decision. The most common response is what Sartre called fleeing into the crowd, adopting whatever choices seem normal or expected, sacrificing authenticity for the comfort of conformity. But here's the psychological twist that changes everything. Once you fully accept the anxiety as an inevitable part of conscious existence, it often transforms into something else entirely. Many people describe a shift from feeling trapped by their freedom to feeling energized by it. The same awareness that initially caused panic becomes a source of profound empowerment. The anxiety doesn't disappear. It becomes the price you willingly pay for living an authentic, self-created life. So the next time anxiety grips you in the middle of a decision, remember this: you're not experiencing a malfunction, you're experiencing the full weight of being human. That uncomfortable feeling in your chest isn't something to medicate away or overcome through positive thinking. It's the price of admission to authentic existence, the tax you pay for being a conscious creature in an unconscious universe. Sartre's paradox reveals that we've been asking the wrong question all along. Instead of, how do I get rid of anxiety, we should be asking, how do I live authentically with the anxiety that comes from being truly free? The goal isn't to eliminate the discomfort of choice, but to embrace it as evidence that you're living as a fully conscious human being rather than sleepwalking through predetermined patterns. Your anxiety isn't your enemy, it's your conscience, reminding you that every moment offers the terrifying and beautiful opportunity to recreate yourself. In a world obsessed with comfort and certainty, perhaps the most radical act is to accept that freedom and anxiety are inseparable, and that this acceptance is the first step toward living a life that's genuinely your own. The question isn't whether you'll feel anxious about your choices, it's whether you'll choose to see that anxiety as a burden or as proof of your magnificent, terrifying freedom.